It had been a year since the defeat of Fire Lord Oze and his forces, and the four nations were at peace. We find ourselves looking into a prison cell with armed guards next to the bars. They are there to monitor and control the fallen Fire Nation princess, Azula. She was a very attractive young woman with long silk-like hair, amber eyes, and a heart-shaped face. Unfortunately, her time in the cell had made her sickly, and she spent most of her time curled up trying to find peace. The voices wouldn't leave her alone. Her father was always putting her down for losing to her brother, while her mother was always saying she was so disappointed in her. You should have crushed them, Oze's voice shouted in her mind, and Azula flinched. Leave me alone, she said to the voice, you're not real. Oze's voice laughed, making Azula curl up more, my dear Azula, I am very real. It said with superiority in its voice, I am here to lead you to victory. You gave me nothing but pain. She shouted out loud, startling the guards. She curled up as far away as she could as tears started to fall. Please, someone, anyone, make the voice stop, she thought as she lay there. In the spirit world, the spirits watched as the former princess fought her demons. She had so much promise, but it had been wasted. A woman with long, black hair, that reached down to her back, watched as well. She wore a formal kimono and walked with an air of authority. She was Kami, the creator of this entire world and many others. She watched as Azula cried. Azula had such a promising future when she was young, but her father had ruined it for her. If she grew up with a little more love, and a lot less hate, she would have changed the world for the better, but alas, that was not to be. She seems so sad, Kami said to herself as she watched. She switched to another world and smiled. In it was a tall blonde who was about 16 years old. He had sun-kissed blonde hair, striking blue eyes, and whisker marks adorning each cheek. He was Naruto Uzumaki, holder of one of her daughters, Kyuubi no Yoko. He had grown up without family or love, but had turned into such a fine and caring young man. He always smiled and seemed to bring out the best in everyone. He was currently in his home village of Konoha awaiting orders. They had managed to stop Madara and Sasuke Uchiha in their bid to control the world, but the war was far from over. He had been ordered by all the cages to stay in his village and not to leave. So, he sat there eating ramen with nothing to do. Kami watched as he talked with the ramen stand owner, a huge smile on his face. He is truly one of a kind, she said, and the other spirits around her nodded. Wish our world had one like him, said a tall woman, wearing green and yellow armor. She was Avatar Kyoshi. Yes, it would have been nice, a man, wearing a long red battle dress, agreed. He would have been an asset in the war. Kami nodded, you might be right, Roku. Kami said with a smile, he can truly bring out the best in anyone. He's not bad on the eyes either, Kyoshi said. Roku looked at her annoyed. She smiled, what? I can't find someone attractive. No, that's not the problem, Roku said, as he looked at her. He is kind of young for you. Kyoshi blushed a bit. Hey, I was just saying, she said, with a hint of annoyance in her voice. A guy like him could make any girl happy, no matter what age. Kami nodded, that is very true, she replied, as an idea formed in her mind. Maybe he is just what she needs. Roku looked at Kami and gave her a puzzled look. What do you mean? He asked, just smiled. You'll have to see, she said, with a huge smile on her face. She looked back at Naruto, then changed her view to Azula. Yes, this might just work. With Azula. Azula lay on the ground in silence. The voices had finally stopped. She lay there curled up, not wanting to move for fear that her father's voice would return. She couldn't take it anymore, she wanted the voices to leave. Soon she heard the sound of the door opening, and a guard walked in with a tray of food. "Here's your dinner," he said, and dropped the tray on the ground. She waited for him to turn away before turning towards the tray. She quietly crawled over, grabbed the food off the tray, and returned to her spot on the ground. She quickly ate all of the food and returned to her curled-up state. "Oh, poor Azula," Oze's voice said, making her flinch. "Locked away, no bending, all alone. Such a disappointment. I should have banished you instead of Zuko." Azula tried not to listen, but Oze's voice wouldn't leave her be. "Destroy your brother, show him who truly should be Fire Lord." "Leave me alone," she said, trying to ignore the ranting voice, but it wouldn't have it. "You are nothing but a piece of filth for failing." Oze's voice shouted at her, "You're not my daughter. You're nothing but an urchin." Azula started to sing to drown out the voice. It was the song she had heard her uncle sing to Zuko, when they were younger. "Leaf from the vine, started so slow, like fragile, tiny shells drifting in the cover. Little soldier boy come marching home, brave little soldier boy, come marching home," she sang. As Oze's voice faded, she sighed in relief for the silence. "It seems this one has lost all will," said a voice in the shadows, making Azula jump. "Well, you would too if your life crumbled around you," said a feminine voice. Azula lifted her head and looked around for the voices. This wasn't like the usual voices who spoke in her head, these ones seemed to be coming from all around. "Oh, how cute, she's looking for us," the male voice said with amusement. "Stop antagonizing the girl," the female voice said with authority. "Yes, ma'am," the male voice said, as Azula saw a paw come out of the shadows for a moment. Azula looked around. "What do you want?" she asked, letting her anger come through. "Well, someone got their fire back," the male voice said, with a hint of mocking. "Ren, hush," the female voice said, with a hint of annoyance. "We are here to help the poor girl, not to antagonize her." She watched, as a small canine-like animal stepped out of the shadows. It was about 4 feet long from snout to tail, orange all over except for the black tips of its ears and a white tail. The animal gave Azula a smile that showed her all of her teeth. Azula would have been afraid of this, but it seemed that the smile didn't hold any hatred in it. Azula scooted away from the animal. "What are you, who are you?" she said as she looked at the animal. The animal smiled once again. "I'm sorry, my name is Hina and I am a fox sent by Kami to help you." "Fox? Kami?" Azula asked, completely confused. "You're just here to torture me, aren't you?" Hina walked towards Azula slowly. "We are not here to torture you, you poor thing," the animal said as she laid down next to Azula. "We are here to help." "Yeah, listen to Kaa-san," Ren said, and stepped out of the shadows. "So, relax." He was smaller than Hina, but he had a mischievous look about him. He walked over to Azula and laid beside her as well. "Why are you here?" she asked, not completely convinced they were real, but they were a nice change from her father's voice. Hina looked up at her. "We are here on a request of our master," she said. "We have been ordered to lead you to a place where you can truly be happy." Azula looked at her with shock, which turned to sadness. "I can never be truly happy," she said finally. Hina looked up at the broken girl. "That's not true," she said with conviction. which startled Azula. Our master believes that the place we are taking you will bring you happiness, and she is never wrong. Azula looked at Hina. Who is this master you speak of? She asked, not believing a word. Kami, of course, said Ren, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Kami? Who is Kami? Azula asked, the confusion evident in her voice. Hina smiled. You would know her as the Great Spirit, Hina said, as Azula looked at her in shock. Why would the Great Spirit want to help me? She asked Hina. Kami always wants to help those who have lost their way, she said to Azula. You have lost your way more than anyone, so she decided she needs to send you to a place where you can be happy. Azula was silent. Was the Great Spirit going to help her of all people? Was it true, or was it another one of her delusions? This is just a trick sent by your brother to torment you, Oze's voice shouted at her, making her flinch as her body tensed. Hina saw this, and leaned against Azula, letting her body warmth calm the girl down. It's all right, Hina said, as Azula slowly became more relaxed. Hina looked at Azula and knew, if she wasn't here any longer she was too far gone. Ren, it's time to move, she said, startling the young fox. Now? He asked in shock. Are you sure? Hina nodded. If she stays here any longer, she won't last, she replied. So go and take care of the guards. Ren smiled a mischievous smile. On it, he said, and disappeared into the shadows. Hina looked at Azula. Azula dear, it's time to go, she said. Azula looked at her. We're leaving, she said, not too sure whether to believe Hina or not. Yes dear, we are, she said and walked towards the prison door. With a swift flick of her tail the sound of the lock opening rang out. She pushed the bars open and smiled, come on. Azula stared at the open door with awe, she couldn't believe it. She could leave. She got up off the floor and took a step, but stopped. What if it was a trick? What if it was her mind playing tricks on her again? She stood frozen, not knowing what to do, until she felt something wrap around her hand. Come Kit, Hina said, it's time to go. Azula only nodded, and allowed the fox to lead her out of the room. If this was a trick of the mind, she'd rather follow the fox than listen to her father. They soon left her cell and headed out of the building. As they walked, Azula noticed the sight of knocked-out guards along their path. They proceeded slowly and finally arrived at the entrance to the prison. Just a few more steps, Hina said, and smiled. Azula froze for a moment. She was almost free. Could this be really happening? Hina looked at her and sighed, pulling her along. They soon stepped outside and Azula shivered as she felt the night air against her body. She couldn't believe she was out. She was free. She looked around and saw nothing but rocks. Come Kit, let's get going, Hina said, and pulled Azula along a little faster this time. Soon they reached the forest area and headed inside the tree line. Hina kept walking with Azula in tow when suddenly the sound of a loud horn could be heard. It seems they have noticed your departure, hurry. Azula nodded, and they started to run. Unfortunately, Azula had been less than active over the past year so she couldn't keep running for long. Hina noticed this and frowned. She looked around for a moment before seeing a large tree with open roots. She led the young woman towards the tree and stopped right next to it. Get inside, Hina ordered. Azula was more than happy to comply. She crawled into the open roots and lay there tired. We will rest here for a few moments before heading out again. Azula nodded and laid her head down. She couldn't help but feel happy about having the feeling of actual dirt on her skin. She had been in her cell for such a long time that this was the most comfortable thing in the world. The scent of leaves filled the air and how the grass felt against her skin. Suddenly, the sound of a footstep filled the air. Azula tensed and waited to be found, when suddenly, Ren burst out of the trees. "Found you," he said out of breath. "I threw them off the trail for a bit, but they will figure it out soon, so we need to move." "Okay, we will," Hina said and turned to Azula. "Are you ready to move?" Azula wanted to say no, but she knew this was probably her only chance to get away. "Yes," she answered and Hina nodded. She slowly got up and crawled out of the open roots. She stood up and Hina wrapped her tail around Azula's hand. They ran through the forest as fast as they could, not wanting to be caught. "There she is," a voice shouted. Azula turned to see a soldier running towards them. She tried to speed up but her body wouldn't allow it, and she tripped over her own feet. She tried to get up as fast as possible but the soldier was already upon her. She looked up at him, saw the skull part of his uniform, and felt fear. "No. I don't want to go back," she said and crawled away. She tried to send some fire at the soldier but nothing came. Her bending was all but gone. He watched this, and continued to advance on her. She kicked him and knocked him back, allowing her enough time to get up, but he was upon her quickly. He had her arms locked behind her back and was about to tie her hands when a small, orange blur attacked him. Azula watched, as Ren attacked the soldier, biting his throat, killing him. "Move it," he said, as the blood dripped from his fangs. Azula nodded, and Hina began to lead her once again. Unfortunately, more soldiers were heading towards them. The small group ran through the forest, dodging patrol after patrol. "There she is," a voice shouted, making the group move as fast as possible. Hina looked back and saw a trio of soldiers gaining on them. "Ren, distract them," Hina ordered, as she pulled Azula on. "Got it, Kaa-san," he said, and turned around. Azula turned her head and watched as Ren started to glow. His fur grew darker. His form started to grow till he was the size of Muzellian. He bared his teeth, and attacked the advancing troops. Azula wasn't able to see the rest of the fight as Hina pulled her deeper. "Almost there," Hina said, when another group of soldiers spotted them. Soon, fireballs were whizzing past the pair, making them dodge to the ground. Hina looked at the group following them and frowned. "Head straight through the trees till you reach a cliff. I will meet you there." Azula was about to protest, when Hina gave her a stern look. "Go," she ordered, and ran towards the charging enemies. Azula ran towards the trees and didn't look back. Hina watched as she disappeared in the trees. She faced her enemies and smiled. "Come face your deaths," she shouted, as she started to change. With Azula. She ran and ran, wanting to reach the cliff as soon as possible. She turned and saw the light of fire coming towards her. Soon the cliff came into the view and she stopped. She looked around and wondered what she was supposed to do next. She looked, hoping to find a boat, or a group waiting to take her away, but no one was around. "What's going to happen?" she asked herself. "You will be brought back to your pitiful little cell," Oze's voice said, making her shake her head. "No. I won't go back," she said, and stepped back closer to the edge. Jose's voice laughed. This was just a trick, my dear, he said, with mocking in his voice. You are going to get caught and dragged back to the little cell to sit and live out the rest of your pitiful life. No. I don't want to, she shouted, drawing the attention of her pursuers. She watched as they came closer and closer. She backed away, inching nearer to the edge. Stop right there, princess, one of the soldiers said. We need to take you back. No. I don't want to go back, she shouted, as she was tittering on the edge. Please, princess, we are not going to hurt you, the soldier said, but Azula shook her head. He sighed and gave the signal. Suddenly a metal cuff wrapped itself around her wrist. She tried to get away, but another cuff grabbed her other wrist. She was brought hard to the ground. She struggled to get away but was held fast and slowly pulled away from the cliff. No. She pleaded, I don't wait to go back. Her pleas fell on deaf ears as she was slowly dragged further away from the cliff. She closed her eyes and let the silent tears fall to the ground. Suddenly, the sound of death filled the air. Azula opened her eyes. She saw several of the soldiers on the ground, blood puddled around their unmoving forms. She looked up and saw Hina standing over them, her fangs bared at her enemies. Leave the kid alone, she shouted at the soldiers, who backed away from the giant fox. Azula watched in awe as Hina charged forward, decimating the soldiers. She takes out many with her claws and tail, but more soldiers come. Soon she is hit by fire from all sides. Hina! Azula shouted, as she watched the fox fall due to her burns. Hina looked down at Azula and gave her a smile. You will be free, Kit, she said, and with a flick of her tail, launches Azula in the air. Azula watched as Hina snarled and attacked, sinking her fangs into the nearest enemy. She takes out soldiers left and right and Azula can only see as a huge blast of fire comes towards the fox. Hina is soon lost from sight, and hits the water. Her eyes close as she loses consciousness. SB. Naruto sat by the water, bored out of his mind. He couldn't take any missions and couldn't leave the village. Because of this, he sat by a large lake in one of the training grounds. He had found it when he was younger and would go there to clear his mind. He sighed to himself as he watched the clouds. Why does Shiki find this fun? He asked aloud. He just likes being lazy, said a female voice in his mind. Naruto smiled, you're right Q, he replied. He was glad to have Kyuubi with him. She was a great friend and after they had worked together to push back Madara, they grew to be like siblings. She was always teasing him and wondering when he was going to find a nice girl to settle down with. Of course I am right. She replied. Naruto smiled, of course you are, he said and looked out towards the water. He noticed something floating in the water, and he got up. He walked quickly out towards the floating thing, when he saw it was a girl about his age. He ran and pulled her out of the water and carried her to shore. She was breathing and he sighed in relief. I'm glad she's okay, he said, and looked down at the girl in his arms. She was beautiful, the way her hair fell on her face, and her body wasn't bad either. He wondered who she was. He had never seen her in the village and wondered how she had ended up in the lake. She slowly opened her eyes and looked up at him. Naruto just smiled at her. Glad to see you're awake, he said. You gave me quite a scare. The girl just looked at him. A look of confusion and fear spread across her face before she blacked out once again.